Hello, everyone. What a incredible crowd here. I know Marty is with us, but he would love to be here sitting in the front row as we, celebrate his life and remember him, and it's going to be a wonderful evening. So my name is Tom Harder, and I am a fraternity brother and a good friend of Marty. So I've known Marty probably, couples probably longer than about anyone else here. So, and Jennifer, these photographs that you accumulated are incredible to see the different phases of Marty's life. And two photos, from one thing, he looks like Andy Warhol. And then another one back there, he looks like FDR, So, but we're going to have a great time. The agenda is we're going to have 6 speakers, including Lucy and Hudson's going to be the last speakers. And I'm going to be kind of the MC, just kind of the segue between everybody's talk. So I'm just going to introduce their name, and they can tell you who they are and how they relate to Marty and tell you a little story about Marty. So first up is another Iowan, another fraternity brother. It's Lyle Whittemire.
It's really an honor to be here tonight, and to be asked by Jennifer and Lucy and Hudson to speak at this celebration of Marty Cooke's life. Marty, my longtime friend, who I've known since we were 18 years old when we met at Iowa State University. I think all of you know, no matter what stage you met him in life, Marty was a ball of energy, enthusiasm, laughter, positivity. But just imagine him at 18 years of age. Man, what a kid. I think one of the questions he was asked a lot in his career was, Marty, Iowa State, really? Why? And believe me, it's what most of us were asking him back in 1970 as well. Marty, why are you here? He seemed just so far ahead of most of us who had come from farms and small towns. We were scratching our heads and other things, wondering why a kid from a prosperous St. Louis suburb who had the smarts and resources to go anywhere chose a university in the middle of corn country. Marty had good answers about everything, but I'm not sure he ever gave any of us in this room a satisfactory answer to the why Iowa State question. But after a lifetime of knowing him, I realized that for someone who made his life about taking the unexpected route, Iowa State made all the sense in the world. Marty wanted to go down a path of his choosing, not just the one paved for him by his upbringing. I'll bet his choice was tough for his parents to accept, but he wanted to go the unconventional route. That was Marty. Jennifer and I were talking on the phone a few weeks ago, and Jennifer said she thought that Iowa made him, that it was almost like his secret ingredient. And I agree, Jennifer. And Marty knew what he was doing, making that unexpected choice, putting himself among people who were very different from him. He carried that heartland experience and counterintuitive approach with him throughout a lifetime of advertising and creative success. Of course, that did not keep his college experience from being a tad surreal. We were in a fraternity together, ATO. The early 70s were a time of hippies and anti-war sentiment, but many traditions were still holding. Most ISU fraternities were still pretty buttoned up, with strong, upright men building good, sturdy parade floats and homecoming displays. And amid this traditionalism, our ATO house had an image of kind of countercultural behavior, odd political statements, other marks of anti-traditionalism. Any guesses from the audience where that reputation might have come from? Marty and another brother, Mark Helmke, were always hanging things on the outside of our chapter house that thumbed our nose at the man. There were banners, well-designed, using typefaces that Saul Bass would be proud of, stating provocative things. One homecoming, when other fraternities were showcasing breakthrough concepts like Meet Oklahoma, the banner on our house said, "Transcend the bullshit." People complained about the public obscenity. The university told us to take it down, but we didn't. During pledging week, while other fraternities displayed catchy banners like "Beta is a great brotherhood," the outside of our house displayed the more abstract, "If you lived here, you'd be home now." One year, for the university's annual spring parade, while others did float themes like flowers sprouting from the ground, Marty suggested we pile a hay wagon full of trash we had picked up at a state park and pull the whole mess by hand through the parade route. Spectators were confused. This was the Nixon era, the Earth Day era, the Kent State anti-war era. Marty and others in our house thought some of that reality and upheaval should at least creep a little into the rah-rah campus life. So the following spring, when the annual parade came around again, the university's suggested theme was "Great Mistakes of the Past." While other Greek houses immediately launched into building floats like the Titanic, the Hindenburg, the Edsel, those poor uncreative bastards, we made a float featuring a giant replica of Richard Nixon, complete with the hands raising up and down, flashing the classic V sign. Marty was behind that idea too. The university didn't like it much, that we had equated a sitting president with great mistakes of the past. But when Nixon resigned in disgrace a year later, we were proven prophetic. Okay, our float wasn't exactly the Eat Me float from the movie Animal House, but it did create a buzz. By the time Marty graduated, our fraternity had an image distinct from every other one on campus. Nonconformist, independent, provocative. He had essentially branded ATO before any of us other idiots even knew what branding was. We just might have been his first successful branding campaign, of which he went on to do so many more in the future, from Reebok to Obama. Marty elevated everyone around him, and he did that for me from the first day I met him. I watched him, learned from his creativity and writing skills and his infectious energy. He inspired me to go on to my own advertising career. He was such a loyal friend who never lost track of me throughout our busy working years. We could talk, and he would provide instant understanding of the ad wars I was immersed in. He would energize me with that classic Marty giggle, and with brilliant words that could tumble out of his brain so quickly, it was like fighting to keep up with a runaway train. His brilliance inspired me all through my career, just as I know he did for so many of you in the room here today. He was that rare individual who blended both creativity and sincerity, able to both do and to inspire. I hope other speakers today will touch more on Marty, the family man, his many achievements in the ad biz. I wanted to talk about the young Marty, the kid and the inspirational friend I knew and looked up to in college. Every one of us who knew him back then knew he was destined for great things, and he proved us right. God bless you, Marty, you did it. Jennifer and Lucy and Hudson, I'm so sorry you didn't have him longer, to have that absolute ball of positive energy in your lives longer. But you did have him, and that is a rarity in life, to share it with someone who exuded so much joy, enthusiasm, and spirit. We miss you, Marty, and we always will.
Thank you, Lyle. So our next speaker is Josh Kilmer Purcell.
Wow, so many people. Not surprising with Marty, and I'm Josh Kilmer Purcell, and I worked with Marty for many, many years. As I always say, he inherited me once, hired me 3 times, fired me once, and stuck by me always. And I want to thank Jen and Lucy and Hudson for giving me a chance to speak today, because that invite alone was an incredible gift that allowed me to sit. I'm going to do better as we go, but allowed me to sit one more time in my head with Marty and pitch him some ideas about what I should say today. Not surprisingly, he nixed almost all of them. Too expected, overly sentimental, less memorializing, more eulogy. Wow, you got it. But finally, the Marty in my head approved a concept that was asymmetric enough for him, just unexpected enough for his own memorial. So allow me to share with you a select few things I couldn't stand about Marty Cooke. The first thing I couldn't stand about Marty Cooke was that he never let anything slide. This man was relentless. From the moment he and I met 30 years ago, Marty has harassed me in my head nonstop to push harder. My life and the lives of almost everybody in this room would have been so much easier if he had just let us go with our first idea, or our second or third or 23rd idea. And the people in this room are geniuses. Our first ideas were already pretty good, but they weren't good enough for Marty. Thanks to Marty, I still find myself blowing up entire presentations minutes before I walk into a room because I thought of something just a little bit better. In fact, the title of this document is Marty 2 Final V9 Final. And I still scribbled on the way down. Marty and I both grew up in the middle of this country where middling is practically everyone's middle name. Being nice and avoiding conflict are two of life's highest achievements where we come from. So the second thing I can't stand about Marty Cooke is that somehow he escaped the Midwestern niceness trap while still perfectly embodying it. Only Marty could say things like, "It's not always nice to be nice," smiling nicely. Marty taught me that it's possible to win any argument without making an enemy. And everyone in this room can list off dozens of successful jerks in this business, or nice guys who caved or slink away when there's a heated debate. But Marty, in his seersucker Sunday best, proved that you never have to bully or cower. You always win by having the winning idea. Having a winning personality was just the icing on the cake for Marty. But perhaps the thing I personally most couldn't stand about Marty Cooke was that he wasn't what he was supposed to be. Marty was a straight, white advertising guy who came into his own in 1980s New York City. And I've known many straight, white advertising guys who come into their own in 1980s New York City, and a whole lot of them are dicks who only succeeded by surrounding themselves with people like themselves. But Lucy and Hudson, I was about your age and in your stage of life when Marty first took me under his wing. And it's really, really important to me that you understand how progressive and how far ahead of his time your father was. So many of us have this sort of innate belief that our parents were simply a product of their time. But Marty's mass influence, with all the work that he put out into this world, made time a product of him. This time we're in right now, this time is a product of him. Long before there was even the idea of diversity or equity. Sorry. Marty always picked the runts of the litter to be on his team. At a time when women and minorities were barely allowed into conference rooms, Marty put a drag queen and his former partner in front of his most conservative clients. In fact, way back in the 1990s, a client asked me off the account because I didn't represent their demographic. And Marty flat out refused. In fact, the next presentation to that client for their healthy but decadent snack food, he presented my tagline, "It's bi-snacksual." It didn't sell. But Lucy, Hudson, there are so many people in this room and in this industry who never would have been given a chance to succeed in life if not for your father. Everyone knows that he championed daring, provocative, and progressive ideas. But his real legacy is that he championed daring, provocative, and progressive people like yourselves. And I know I'm supposed to traditionally end this sort of thing with some sort of platitude about celebrating Marty's life and that we should all be happy for the times we had it. Marty would really hate that. So instead, I'll end with my truth. The one final thing I can't stand about Marty Cooke is that he's not standing here right now.
Well, that was wonderful. Next up is Michelle Rufa.
How the hell am I supposed to follow that? So I'm honored to be speaking here when there are so many people here who knew Marty so well and who are such amazing people.
Move the mic closer, please.
Yeah. Oh God, you want to hear me too? Jen, thank you for asking me to speak, and Jen and Hudson, thank you for sharing Marty with us. I'm Michelle Rufa. Marty hired me. It was my second job in advertising at MNC Saatchi, and then I followed him to SSNK. And this was at the very end. Jen had asked people to write letters to read to Marty, and this is the letter that I wrote to him. And so this is what I wrote. Marty, this is to thank you. I came to you from an agency where everything was done by the book. Okay, it was Cliff Freeman and they used a very weird book, but still it was a writer who worked with an art director, and we wrote narrative scripts where A went to B, went to C. And the first thing you did when you hired me is refuse to hire me an art director for a partner. Instead, you put me with the best designer I've ever worked with to this day, Alice-Ann Wilson, she's here. Another iconoclast who is so insanely good at what she does. She constantly made me feel like Salieri, sweating out my vest, and then watching Mozart breeze in and blow me out of the water with, oh, this little thing. And for our first assignment together, we got together and I took out my notepad of my ideas that I've been working on. And I had things like, so we see an astronaut and he's up on the moon and he sees a tree, and then, or we follow a girl and she's walking down the street and then she runs into this strange door. And then it's Alice-Ann's turn and she says something like, I'm thinking green. And I'm just, how do I work like this? That's not an idea, that's not a story, that's a color. And this would happen again and again and again, not always colors, but you get the idea. And finally I went to you, Marty, and I said, I don't think this is working. I think I really need to work with the traditional art director because I don't know how to concept like this. And Marty, I don't remember exactly what you said, but it basically came down to, now Michelle. She's awesome, and you're awesome, and the two of you are gonna make this work because I believe in you. With the strong hint that just maybe the way I've always done things isn't the only way. It was the nicest possible way to say get over yourself without actually saying get over yourself. I was flabbergasted, but I also figured out how to work together, how to work completely non-traditionally. And that was the biggest thing I ever learned from you, out of many, many things. Because once I figured out that green could actually be a concept, that it was a way of looking at storytelling in a non-narrative and surprising way, it opened up whole avenues of creativity, which I think was what you were always all about. Why on earth should we be telling stories the same way and expect people to pay attention, especially when we're trying to sell something? I mean, who would want to listen to that? You always wanted to find a new way in. It seems like you didn't even care if it didn't work, so long as it made people sit up and say, what was that? I don't think anyone has ever challenged me the same way, and it's impacted me the rest of my entire career. It made me nuts that you never wanted to enter anything in award shows, even when we thought they were great. But I also understood that you probably genuinely meant it when you said that you didn't care if other people in advertising didn't like your work, because you knew that it was better than anyone else's, because people noticed it. And you knew that if you were noticed in advertising, you were already 9/10 of the way there. And who can ever achieve that? I tell this story all the time. I brought you a script once. I think it was for British Airways. It was a funny script. I was really proud of it. And you said something to me like, Michelle, this is a really great script. It's a fantastic example of this kind of script, really. But even if it was the very best version of this type of script ever, I'm not gonna buy it, because it's still a type of script. Shake the box. Like I said, I quote you all the time. I think of you all the time, but especially that quote, shake the box. If I'm getting stuck in how I'm thinking about something, or if I don't like anything I've written, or if teams that I'm leading can't get their heads around a brief, or when all the work starts to feel formulaic, especially because formulas always work, which is why they're formulas, just shake the box. I picture a boggle game, like all the letters that they're mixed around, and you've got all these words, but each time you shake it up, they come down a different way. So even if they were perfect before, there's always a completely new way of looking at things. Mazel tov. And most of the time, it's a better way. You just have to get over yourself. I never did understand the seersucker thing, though.
So next up is another Midwesterner, Steve Julison.
I'm actually reading from a letter from a copywriter named David Corr, who was also asked to write a letter to Jennifer. He says, "My name is David Corr. I worked for Marty at Shia Day and then at Berkeley. My story is about his kindness. There was a time while at Berkeley when I was struggling. Because we worked together in the past, Marty knew that I was capable. But for about 3 months running, I'd been going through a rough period and I was not being productive. I've since been in supervisory positions, and I know how easy it is to simply give up on a person who isn't delivering. There are so many other demands on your time. You avoid the issue. The person who is struggling falls deeper and deeper into trouble and ultimately has to be let go. But Marty didn't do that. He wouldn't do that. Instead, he invited me out to lunch. We went to a nice restaurant around the corner. Shortly after ordering, Marty settled in and got to the point. He's always had a great way of getting to the point, letting you know when it's time to really pay attention. He told me straight up that I've been unproductive for too long. He told me he likes me and he thinks I'm talented, but that he has to run a department. He needs everyone on his team to be productive. He simply can't afford to keep a senior person who's not pulling his weight. I thought for sure that I was about to be fired. But this is what's so special about Marty. Marty doesn't easily give up on people. He didn't give up on me. He didn't fire me. He told me it's not too late. He told me that he believed in me. He told me that he wants me to succeed. He told me in the kindest way, the most direct and honest way, that I had to make changes and I had to make them quickly. We spent the rest of that lunch talking about what was wrong and what could be done to fix it. He offered help and plenty of encouragement. He talked about the exciting work that was ahead of us. And even though I felt the weight of the problem that needed to be fixed, I left that lunch excited and energized. Rather than feeling I had a boss who was out to get me, I knew I had a friend who wanted to help me. Shortly after that lunch, and with Marty's extraordinary creative direction, I produced some of the best work of my career. More importantly, I learned valuable lessons that helped me throughout my career and life. To be honest and direct, to intervene before it's too late, to take action even if it's awkward or inconvenient, to be kind to people who are struggling. I've had these talks with people who work for me. When I notice someone struggling, I'd say to myself that I need to have the Marty talk with them. I can't say that I did it as well as Marty did, but I did it because Marty did it for me. I've even told this story to my 2 boys as they were growing up. I continue to tell them this story now as they navigate their own careers. Jen, I hope you get a chance to share this story with Marty. I would love for him to hear how grateful I am to have known him. Of course, you'll probably be flooded with messages like this, which is the most telling story of all.
And our final 2 speakers are going to be Lucy and Hudson.
In the few days before my dad passed away, we received countless stories and anecdotes about Marty, which people sent in at my mom's request. We read these aloud at his bedside. The one which David Core sent, which Steve just read, struck me because it got at my dad's style of giving feedback. Recently, I've been trying to remember more about how exactly my dad parented me and my brother growing up, because even though we haven't been able to have a conversation with him in a long time, so many aspects of him, from his goofiness to his work ethic, to his always pushing people to think outside of the box, have stuck around for me and my brother. So clearly, he was able to ingrain these things in us over the years. It's confusing though, because I don't know how my dad conveyed any of this to us. I can't remember him ever enforcing any rules growing up. I have no memories of him reprimanding me or my brother, or laying down the law in any meaningful way. That was my mom's job. He never got mad or raised his voice, except for one infamous time he lost his temper because he couldn't get the VHS player to work. An event so out of character, we teased him about it for years afterwards. As backstory as well, he and my mom sent me and Hudson to a school that didn't give grades. Instead, each teacher wrote a paragraph or 2 about how each student was doing each semester, and this was sent home to parents. So the idea of doing well in school was not exactly a hard and fast rule either. The first time I can remember my dad giving me any sort of feedback was when report cards came home midway through 6th grade. That was peak middle school, with all the social dramas and distractions that came with that, and school had become slightly less of a priority for me that semester. He found a moment, just the 2 of us, and told me that he had read my report cards, and that he knew I could do better. He didn't raise his voice. He wasn't disappointed. It was apparent he had spent a lot of time thinking about how to communicate this to me. He wanted my standards for myself to be as high as his were for me. And him having these implicit high standards meant he believed in me. And at age 11, I think I already knew intuitively that he never doubted me or my brother, but that was the first time he had ever communicated these standards out loud. I asked Hudson about this recently, and he said that the only time our dad had given him explicit feedback was a carefully worded observation that my brother needed to be careful about his sharp elbows. If you know my brother, you know he can be quite opinionated. Similarly, this statement was delivered quietly and to the point, in a way that showed that my dad had been paying close attention and that he felt it necessary to steer us into a slightly different direction for our own benefit. For both of us, these moments were so pointed and so rare that when they happened, we really took note. His style was the opposite of the boy who cries wolf. He obviously communicated his influence in other ways besides these few conversations, but I'm finding myself marveling that he was able to do this so effectively, and I'm not quite understanding how. And in a way, his parenting style being so lead by example means that it was able to carry into his Parkinson's chapter, where speaking a full sentence became next to impossible. In the last few years, it became increasingly difficult for him to speak more than a few words or communicate a coherent thought. It was basically impossible to know how much of the world around him he was able to comprehend. A little over 2 years ago, I was visiting home and was at the dinner table with my parents. Dad found a pause in the conversation and interjected that I had been using the phrase, "I don't know," a lot when I talked. A speech habit I wasn't aware I had picked up. "You might want to stop doing that," he said quietly. My mom and I were shocked. Not only was this a lot of words to get out, it also showed he had been taking in more of his surroundings than we thought. Once again, even in this late Parkinson's stage, his feedback was to the point, didn't come off as judgmental, and showed that he had been observing carefully and quietly. It's a lucky coincidence he wasn't overly dependent on speech, one of the many things which Parkinson's took away. So while I'm still piecing together what this parenting style was and how he managed to convey so much to us in so few words, I'm thinking a lot about how it mirrors the type of feedback that I most appreciate now from other people around me. To the point, calm, thoughtful, encouraging. Less is more. It is certainly true that I had been saying I don't know too often, but I'm finding now that there are so many I don't knows. I don't know how he managed to convey the influence on me and Hudson that he did. I don't know why exactly these few instances of explicit feedback have stuck with me as strongly as they have. I don't know how much he was able to understand what was happening around him in the last few years or the last few days. I do know that I miss him terribly, and I have for years now. I do know that I'd give a lot to be able to ask him about all this now. And I do know that I'm trying to stop saying, I don't know.
I think this is a tricky speech to give. Obviously, no memorial speech is easy, but I find myself really struggling with the question of how much to talk about Parkinson's and my dad's relationship to the disease. Over the last 10 years or so, my dad's symptoms did come to be a defining characteristic for his everyday life, and so realistically, I have to admit that it plays a large part in my recent memory of him. But at the same time, I'm wary of over-associating his memory with the disease because he was obviously so much more than the last 7 years of his life. While he was diagnosed over 15 years ago, I think I first became aware of the symptoms when I was in college. I was around 18 years old, which is right around the time that you begin to realize that your parents are flawed. Sorry, Mom. And I think to a large extent, it's the realization of those flaws that makes you realize your parents are fully realized people. Due to my dad's Parkinson's diagnosis, that perceptual shift took on a different tenor, with the result being that I don't think my sister or I ever really got to know Marty as a wholly rounded person. The picture I have of my dad is frozen at an age when I still viewed him as an 18-year-old, which is to say biased in the ways that sons look up to their fathers and necessarily incomplete. It's been interesting to try to complete that image of him now that he's gone. After he passed, there was a long LinkedIn thread in his honor where his former colleagues wrote their memories of him. But they were memories from a decade's past in a professional field I know very little about. And then we've also been looking at old scrapbooks, in which every picture he looks more groovy than I'll ever hope to be. And while looking at these bits of memorabilia was a sweet experience, it was also an alienating one, because it heightened the sense that there was this whole life of Marty before my sister and I were there that we weren't really aware of. But despite of everything I just said, which I do believe to be true, we did come into an adulthood knowing a version of Marty that was remarkable in its own right. It wasn't what was expected, but it was still powerful. My sister and I got to know our father as an adult through how he handled his diagnosis. His character came through for us in how he approached his symptoms, their treatments, or the lack thereof. My dad was always a lead by example type in our family, as my sister touched on. And while I hope to never undergo the trials he went through, I was constantly impressed by his attitude, even when things got bad. I only heard him complain once, right around when Parkinson's was beginning to slow down his speech. His one complaint was that his affected speech robbed him of the timing necessary for a well-delivered pun. And I think this lack of complaining was more than just some sort of like Protestant stoicism. I think it was just in his nature to be graceful. His character came through in how he interacted with art as well, which is often how I related to him. When his mobility and speech were impaired and listening was really the main way he could interact with the world, he would still appreciate Bach's Goldberg variations, played by my nephew earlier, or his nephew, and the music of Van Morrison. But he also loved listening to the local radio station out on Long Island. There was this one ongoing radio campaign for a waste removal service that featured the marital arguments of a fictional couple, Ray and Sharon. They would resolve their disagreement in about 35 seconds, and they never failed to list the company's telephone number in just the least organic way possible. And my dad loved listening to those radio spots, and he never failed to note them. And between listening to Bach and those campy radio spots, I'm not sure which brought him more joy. There were countless times when communication with him was near impossible, and still his nurses and caretakers would make a point of telling us what a kind man he was. Even when Parkinson's robbed him of his most basic abilities, you could tell he still retains his sense of humor, his caring nature, and his grace. So I do have great pain that I didn't get to know Marty as a fully rounded adult through the typical avenues. I do think my sister and I managed to build a coherent picture of him, not despite Parkinson's, but in a sense because of it. And the picture we have is one of a smart, caring man and someone whose memory will carry with us for years to come. Thanks.
We all loved Marty Cooke, and Jennifer and Lucy and Hudson, he'll be with you for the rest of your lives. If you hadn't had a chance to mingle and see all the beautiful photos and displays that Jennifer and Hudson and Lucy have put together, please do. After this, there's going to be a lot of food, there's going to be a lot of drink, a lot of social socializing with each other, and I think what would be really nice, you go out and meet people and just say how you knew Marty. I used to work with him at an agency, or I was a fraternity brother of his, or however you happen to have a relationship with Marty, and share that with somebody else. So, Jennifer, thank you all, family, for having us here. So, cheers.